Welcome in, everyone, to Lively Lewis Stories.
That's right, we're back with even more awesome adventures with Levi and Ivy.
Set your storytime meter to fun and get ready to join the Lively Lewis crew.
All you need is your imagination and...
Off we go! I can't wait to see where our story takes us today.
Have you ever wanted to get more Lively Lewis in your life?
Well, we've got you covered.
Grab an adult and zoom over to livelylewisshop.com.
Or just click on the link in our show notes.
Enough about that. Let's get to today's super Lively Lewis story.
3, 2, 1, blast off! Shouted Levi as he laid in the grass in his backyard. He stared up at a crystal blue sky as clouds drifted by overhead. Next to him, Ivy watched as well. Captain Levi, check. Captain Levi, this is Captain Ivy. We are now leaving the atmosphere, said Ivy as she pretended to push buttons and flip switches on an imaginary control panel in front of her. Excellent, Captain Ivy, called Levi back as he flipped imaginary levers and switches. Another successful launch. We'll be back exploring outer space in no time. The two brave explorers then let their minds create a galactic wonderland all around them. What they once knew as their backyard was now transformed in their minds to the outer reaches of the galaxy. Levi and Ivy were now flying through a star-filled sky, dodging meteors and setting their sights on their next space adventure. That was until... Levi, Ivy, it's time for dinner, called their mom, interrupting their daydream and shaking them right back into the reality of their own backyard. Mom, we were just about to land on a brand new planet, said Ivy as she stood up. Yeah, I was thinking we were going to name it Levi-topia. That has a nice ring to it, don't you think? Asked Levi as he stood up next to Ivy. Not as nice as Ivy-topia, said Ivy with a giggle. I bet on your planet it would rain cheeseburgers and every day would be Saturday. Sounds good to me, answered Levi. And I bet your planet would be covered in marshmallow trees and chocolate milk rivers, right? Exactly, said Ivy as she walked toward the house with a big smile. Well, you can tell us all about your space adventure over dinner, said their mom. Now let's head inside and get washed up. Once Levi and Ivy sat down at the table, they noticed that their dad had a big smile on his face. They got really excited, wondering what was the big surprise he had to tell them. So we're going on a trip tomorrow, said Levi and Ivy's dad. Tomorrow we're going to the Science Museum to see the brand new space exploration exhibit, exclaimed Levi and Ivy at the same time. Well, sort of, answered their dad. I got you two a special meet and greet with Professor Quasar. He's the lead scientist on the new Space Shuttle 3000 project. Levi and Ivy couldn't believe what they were hearing. They knew all about Professor Quasar and were over the moon that they were going to get to meet him in person. It was even better than seeing the new museum exhibit. I have so many questions for Professor Quasar, said Levi. Like, what kind of turbo boosters are they using on the new space shuttle? And when is the test flight? And how far can it go? And how fast can it go? And has he ever discovered a new planet in one of his missions? And has he ever wished on a shooting star while in outer space? Added Ivy, interrupting Levi. And what does it feel like to be weightless? And what are they going to name the space shuttle? And can we take a ride on it too? Ivy and Levi had a giant list of questions that they would be asking the professor when they met him the next day. And as dinner went on, it grew and grew. Now, kiddos, I know Professor Quasar is very excited to meet you, but maybe we wait on the 101 questions until after we say hello, joked their dad as he ate his dinner. You think we're going to ask him 101 questions? Asked Ivy, looking shocked at the number. Because clearly we're going to ask him like 1,001 questions, laughed Levi. After all, outer space is massive and filled with so many unanswered questions. How long are we going to meet him anyways? Levi and Ivy's dad went on to tell him that they would be with Professor Quasar for the whole day, assisting him in his lab and learning all about the Space Shuttle 3000 project. After dinner, Levi and Ivy got ready for bed and made a wish on a shooting star. Both wished that their time with Professor Quasar would be a day they would never forget. The next morning could not arrive fast enough, and when Levi and Ivy's parents woke up, they found their two excited space explorers had already eaten breakfast, gotten dressed, and were waiting to head over to the Science Museum. In no time at all, Levi and Ivy found themselves running up the giant stone stairs that led to the museum. And waiting for them when they arrived was, of course, Professor Quasar! Shouted Levi and Ivy together. We are such big fans of you, Ivy continued. And we can't wait to spend the day with you learning everything we can about space and the Space Shuttle 3000 project. And maybe, just maybe, we could get a ride on the shuttle. Levi and Ivy both laughed, as did Professor Quasar. Well, you never know exactly what will happen here at the Space Museum, answered the professor. But I do know we have a great time no matter what we do. Levi and Ivy said goodbye to their parents and followed Professor Quasar down a long hallway, passing a sign that said, "Employees only." Professor Quasar didn't waste any time once they all got into his lab. Levi and Ivy, I am so happy to have you join me today. I know how much you love space travel, and we need to move quickly if we're going to fit everything in that I'd like to show you today, began Professor Quasar. Well, we have all day, answered Levi. So why the big rush? While all day does seem like a good amount of time to spend here at the museum, it's just the right amount of time to fly back and forth to outer space, said Professor Quasar in a calm voice as he looked at the clipboard filled with notes and numbers. I guess you're right, answered Ivy as what Professor Quasar had said slowly sank in, and once it did, she and Levi didn't know how to react. Well, wait a minute. Did you just say we're flying to outer space today? Asked Levi, sounding shocked and unbelievably excited. An outer space trip on Space Shuttle 3000? Shouted Ivy, just as excited as Levi. Not exactly, said the professor, making Levi and Ivy very confused. We don't call it Space Shuttle 3000 anymore. It's now called Space Shuttle Stardust. And as he said that, he opened two large doors that led into a giant garage. Inside the massive garage was the biggest space shuttle Levi and Ivy had ever seen in person. More specifically, it was the only space shuttle Levi and Ivy had ever seen in person. We can't waste any more time. We need to hop aboard right now, said Professor Quasar. It's perfectly safe, and no one knows more about this shuttle than I do. And if everything goes according to plan I've mapped out, we'll be back just in time for your parents to pick you up. You see, I have taken this trip today because I need to check on the Space Station Nebula. The cameras that we installed to monitor the surrounding galaxy here at the museum are not transmitting any signal. I'm sure it's nothing I can't fix quickly. Levi and Ivy just stood there and listened to Professor Quasar talk as he gave them spacesuits and instructed them how to put them on. He continued telling the excited young space explorers about their mission as he walked them onto the Space Shuttle Stardust and closed the giant exterior door behind them. So yeah, that's it. Pretty straightforward and simple, said Professor Quasar to Levi and Ivy, who thought this twist to their museum visit sounded amazing. But definitely not simple. Are you sure everything will be okay? Asked Ivy. Absolutely, answered Professor Quasar. The first trip on a new shuttle is always my favorite. First trip? Said Levi as his eyes got wide. So we'll be going into space on your new shuttle's first ever launch? Could this take it any better? It could. The possibilities in space are endless, so you never know what amazing things you'll see or do, said Professor Quasar reassuringly. And with not another minute to spare, Professor Quasar told Levi and Ivy to buckle up and begin the countdown. Then, as they had done so many times in their backyard, they counted down from 10, anticipating a wonderful space adventure. Except this time, they wouldn't be having that space adventure in their imagination in their backyard. All the planets, stars, and galaxies they would be flying past would be real. And they couldn't wait to see it all. Space Shuttle Stardust rumbled as the turbo thrusters turned on. Then, as Levi and Ivy counted, 3, 2, 1! They blasted straight through the open ceiling in the giant garage, and in no time, Levi, Ivy, and Professor Quasar were zooming through the atmosphere, heading toward an adventure unlike any other. Minutes passed as Levi and Ivy stared out the space shuttle's circular windows. They watched as a million stars surrounded them, shining brightly against the darkness of space. Then all of a sudden, the shuttle settled down and began to drift along calmly and slowly. Great job, you two. You are officially on your first space shuttle ride. How does it feel? Asked Professor Quasar. Levi and Ivy couldn't answer. No words could convey how exciting and breathtaking it was. But the smile on their faces told Professor Quasar all he needed to know. He told them to enjoy the view as he navigated to Space Station Nebula. As they sat and watched the wonders of space unfold before them, Levi and Ivy suddenly realized they both had a question to ask Professor Quasar. Hey, Professor, while we're drifting along, do you think it would be okay if we unbuckled our seatbelts and had a chance to float around in zero gravity? Asked Levi. I don't see why not, said Professor Quasar. It's one of the most fun things about being up here. Have fun, but just watch out so that you don't bump into anything. Levi and Ivy barely let him finish his sentence before they unbuckled their seatbelts and let zero gravity take over. They floated around, gently sailing from one end of the shuttle to the other, laughing and giggling the whole time. They did space flips midair and bounced gently off the walls, being careful to avoid any knobs, buttons, or switches. As they were floating around, Levi made his way over to one of the windows. "Ivy, can you believe this is what we're doing right now?" said Levi. Ivy didn't respond because she was too busy seeing what it felt like to dance in zero gravity. In case you're wondering, it's awesome. Levi continued to stare out the window and let his imagination take over. As he thought of all the amazing things they could see that day, something caught his eye. He turned his head quickly, but didn't see anything. Going back to his daydream, Levi saw something move again just out of view. He called Ivy over to his window to have a look. He thought maybe it was just his mind playing tricks on him. But when Ivy came over and looked out the window, he noticed something was moving as well. And that's when they saw it. Plain as day, a real life. "Hey friends, what do you think it's going to be?" Shout it out. "Alien!" screamed Levi and Ivy as they pushed themselves back from the window and went floating into the control panel by Professor Quasar. "Kids, please watch out. We don't want to press any buttons we're not supposed to," said Professor Quasar, turning around just in time to see the scared looks on their faces. "What's wrong?" Ivy and Levi couldn't speak and instead just pointed out the window. Professor Quasar floated over to see what was going on for himself. As he looked out the window, he laughed and turned back around with a big smile on his face. "I see you've met Zara," said Professor. "She's a space friend of mine from planet Glimmeron. She always likes to say hello to any passing shuttles. I'll let her in. You can say hello to her yourselves." Levi and Ivy immediately felt better because Professor Quasar knew the little alien and now were very excited to meet her. After the professor allowed Zara to enter the space shuttle, Levi and Ivy quickly found themselves standing in front of the cutest purple and blue alien they had ever seen in person. More specifically, it was the only purple and blue alien Levi and Ivy had ever seen in person. "Hello, Zara. It's great to see you again," said Professor Quasar before introducing his friends to Levi and Ivy. "Wow, you're a real alien," said Levi. "And you're a real person," said Zara with a look of amazement on her face. "No matter how many times I meet a person, I just can't believe they really exist. So what brings you to my part of the galaxy, Professor?" "We're up here to make a quick run by Space Station Nebula. The video connection has been down for a few days, so we just came up here to fix it," replied Professor Quasar. "So, just a quick trip." "Oh no, if I were you, I'd stay far away from Space Station Nebula as possible," answered Zara with a concerned look on her face. "How about you take a quick stop on my home planet of Glimmeron and I'll tell you all about it." But what could Zara have to tell Professor Quasar, Levi, and Ivy? What was wrong with Space Station Nebula? They had to find out. So off they went to Glimmeron. Hey friends, that's the end of part 1. Come back soon for part 2. Thanks for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the story and learned a little something too.
And since we know everyone has their own story, we'd love to hear yours.
If you have an idea for a Lively Lewis story, leave a comment on our Apple Podcast review page with 5 stars, your idea, and your little one's name.
Then maybe our next adventure will be with you.
Until our next Storytime Hangout.
Thanks for listening. We can't wait to share another fun, Lively Lewis story with you.